Imagine waking up at 4 a.m. to the sound of your own coughing. Your lungs are black from years of inhaling coal dust and metal particles. Your hands are permanently scarred from burns and cuts. And today? Today you'll work 16 hours straight in temperatures that would make a modern factory worker quit on the spot. This was the daily reality for medieval blacksmiths, the backbone of every medieval town, yet living a life so brutal that most of us today couldn't survive a single week. You think your job is tough? By the end of this video, you'll realize just how privileged we are in the 21st century. But here's what will shock you most. These blacksmiths weren't just craftsmen. They were the engineers, the weapons manufacturers, and the economic powerhouses who literally shaped the world we live in today. So let me take you on a journey. We're going back 700 years to spend 24 hours in the life of a medieval blacksmith. And I promise you, this will change how you see your own daily struggles forever. It's 4 a.m. in the 14th century England. While you're probably hitting snooze on your alarm right about now, our blacksmith Thomas is already coughing up black phlegm. This isn't a cold. This is what happens when you breathe metal particles and coal smoke for decades. But here's something you need to understand about medieval times that Hollywood never shows you. There were no sick days, no workers' compensation, no retirement plans. If Thomas doesn't work today, his family doesn't eat tonight. It's that simple. As Thomas stumbles out of his straw bed, sharing a single room with his wife and 3 children, he's already calculating today's survival. He needs to produce at least 20 horseshoes, repair 5 farming tools, and if he's lucky, work on a sword commission that could feed his family for a month. Now think about your morning routine. Coffee, hot shower, checking your phone. Thomas? He's drinking water that tastes like rust, washing his face with the same water he'll use to cool hot metal later. And his biggest concern isn't what's trending on social media. It's whether the noble who commissioned that sword will actually pay him. You see, blacksmiths lived in a world where one bad day could mean death. Not metaphorically, literally. And yet these men were creating the very tools that built our civilization. By 5 a.m., Thomas is lighting his forge. And this is where your comfortable modern life would crumble instantly. The forge burns at 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. That's hot enough to melt copper. In a medieval workshop with no ventilation, no safety equipment, no OSHA regulations. Picture this. You're standing 3 feet from a furnace that's hotter than lava, swinging a 4-pound hammer repeatedly for hours, while toxic fumes fill your lungs with every breath. And you're doing this in leather clothes because that's all the protection you have. But here's what makes this even more brutal. Medieval blacksmiths had to create their own charcoal. Thomas spent every Sunday chopping wood and burning it in oxygen-starved pits. This wasn't just hard labor. This was chemistry. Get it wrong, and your forge won't reach the temperatures needed to work iron. Get it wrong often, and you're out of business. Now, when you complain about your office being too hot or too cold, remember Thomas. He's working in an environment that would be considered a war crime today, and he's doing it with precision that modern machines struggle to match. And speaking of precision, every piece of metal Thomas shapes today will determine someone's survival. That horseshoe, if it's poorly made, the horse goes lame. The farmer can't work his fields, his family starves. That sword, if it breaks in battle, a knight dies. The pressure on medieval blacksmiths wasn't just economic, it was life and death for entire communities. Here's something that will blow your mind about medieval economics. That iPhone in your pocket, it costs about the same relative to your income as a single horseshoe cost a medieval farmer. Think about that. 1 horseshoe. Thomas charges 4 pence for a horseshoe when a common laborer makes 3 pence per day. But before you think Thomas is getting rich, let me break down his costs. Iron ore, charcoal, tool maintenance, workshop rent, taxes to the Lord, guild fees, and feeding a family of 5. After expenses, Thomas makes about the same as that common laborer, but with 10 times the skill requirement and 100 times the physical danger. And here's where it gets really interesting for us today. Medieval blacksmiths were the first entrepreneurs. They had to understand metallurgy, economics, customer service, inventory management, and quality control. Does this sound familiar? These are the exact skills we value in modern business. But unlike modern entrepreneurs, Thomas can't just pivot to a new market if things go wrong. He can't get a loan from a bank. He can't declare bankruptcy and start over. One economic downturn, one bad harvest that reduces demand for tools, one war that disrupts iron supplies, and his family faces starvation. This is why understanding medieval blacksmiths matters to you today. They represent the ultimate example of resilience, innovation under pressure, and the entrepreneurial spirit that built our modern economy. Every time you take a business risk, you're following in their footsteps, except with a safety net they never had. It's now 10 a.m., and Thomas is entering what I call the zone of mastery. He's been hammering red-hot iron for 5 hours, and something magical happens. His movements become rhythmic, precise, almost meditative. This isn't just physical labor anymore. This is artistry. Watch how a medieval blacksmith works, and you're seeing something that took 20 years to master. Thomas can tell the temperature of metal by its color in dim light. He knows exactly how many hammer blows are needed for each type of joint. He can forge weld 2 pieces of iron together using techniques that modern welders study in textbooks. But here's what's really incredible. Thomas learned all this without YouTube tutorials, without instruction manuals, without even the ability to read. Everything he knows was passed down through apprenticeship, trial and error, and sheer determination. Think about how we learn today. We Google everything, watch videos, take online courses. Thomas had to figure out metallurgy through experimentation that could literally blow up in his face. One mistake mixing metals could create an explosion. One error in heat treatment could ruin weeks of work. Yet these blacksmiths developed steel-making techniques that we're only now beginning to understand fully. Damascus steel, created by medieval Middle Eastern blacksmiths, had properties that modern science couldn't replicate until the 20th century. This speaks to something profound about human potential. When survival depends on mastery, humans achieve incredible things. Thomas and his fellow blacksmiths were operating at a level of skill and innovation that puts most of us to shame. They had to be perfect because imperfection meant death, their own or their customers'. And this is a lesson we desperately need today. In our world of infinite do-overs, save points in safety nets, we've lost something that medieval blacksmiths had: the drive for absolute mastery born from absolute necessity. By noon, Thomas has visitors. Farmers bringing broken plows, knights commissioning weapons, merchants discussing iron prices. And here's where medieval blacksmiths become truly fascinating. They were the center of information networks that spanned continents. You see, blacksmiths didn't just work with metal, they worked with secrets. They knew which lords were preparing for war based on weapon orders. They knew which farms were struggling based on tool repairs. They knew economic trends based on metal prices. In a world without newspapers, radio, or internet, blacksmiths were the information brokers. But more than that, they were social revolutionaries. Though they didn't know it, every tool Thomas made increased agricultural productivity. Better plows meant more food, which meant larger populations, which meant more specialization, which meant more innovation. Medieval blacksmiths were literally forging the path to the modern world. Here's something that will change how you see social progress. The rise of the middle class began in blacksmith shops. Thomas isn't nobility, but he's not a serf either. He owns his tools, his workshop, his skills. He can negotiate prices, choose customers, even relocate to better markets. This was revolutionary in a feudal society where most people were born into fixed social roles. And this connects directly to your life today. The gig economy, freelancing, entrepreneurship, all of these modern concepts trace back to medieval craftsmen like Thomas, who created the first truly independent professional class. Every time you negotiate a contract, set your own prices, or build a personal brand, you're using social structures that medieval blacksmiths pioneered. They proved that value creation, not birth status, could determine your place in society. It's 8 p.m. now. Thomas has been working for 16 hours in conditions that would shut down any modern workplace instantly. His hands are bloody, his back is screaming, and he's inhaled enough metal dust to coat his lungs black. But here's the reality that really hits home. Thomas will likely die before age 45. Not from disease, not from war, but from his work. Lead poisoning from certain metals, lung disease from smoke inhalation, infections from constant cuts and burns, and simple physical breakdown from decades of extreme labor. Medieval blacksmiths had a life expectancy 15 years shorter than other craftsmen. They paid for our technological advancement with their bodies and their lives. Now, when you think about the progress we've made, antibiotics, safety regulations, workers' rights, environmental protection, remember that these advances were built on the sacrifices of people like Thomas. Every workplace safety law exists because someone like him suffered without it. But here's what makes their sacrifice meaningful. They chose it. Thomas could have been a farmer, a baker, a merchant. He chose blacksmithing because he understood something profound, that mastering the transformation of raw materials into tools that improve human life was worth any personal cost. This is the mindset that built civilization. People willing to sacrifice comfort, safety, even their lives to push human capability forward. And the question this raises for us today is uncomfortable but necessary. What are we willing to sacrifice for progress? What price are we paying to advance human potential? As Thomas finally banks his forge at 9 p.m., 17 hours after starting, he's not just ending another day, he's continuing a chain of innovation that stretches from ancient Babylon to Silicon Valley. The iron Thomas worked today might become part of a plow that feeds a village, a sword that defends a kingdom, or architectural elements that support cathedrals still standing 700 years later. His work literally shaped the physical world we inherited. But more importantly, Thomas and millions of blacksmiths like him shaped our mental world. They proved that humans could master nature through knowledge, skill, and determination. They showed that innovation comes from the marriage of theoretical understanding and practical application. They demonstrated that individual excellence could drive collective progress. Today, when you face challenges in your career, your business, your personal growth, remember Thomas. You have advantages he couldn't imagine: safety, education, technology, support systems. Yet the core challenge remains the same. How do you transform raw potential into valuable results? The medieval blacksmith's forge may be cold now, but the flame of human innovation they tended continues to burn. Every time you solve a problem, create something new, or push through difficulty to achieve mastery, you're honoring their legacy. And maybe, just maybe, you'll realize that your own daily struggles, the ones that feel so overwhelming, are actually opportunities to join that eternal chain of human progress that stretches back to smoky medieval workshops and forward to futures we can't yet imagine. The brutal reality of being a medieval blacksmith wasn't just about surviving impossible conditions. It was about proving that humans can transform the world through skill, determination, and sacrifice. And that legacy lives on in every one of us today.